Chapter 30, The Door. Daniel and Fate passed the almost unbearable midday heat by trying to nap on the top floor where the open windows offered a light breeze. After another training session, which consisted of Fate showing Daniel coin tricks and describing in painfully tedious detail how to properly perform mundane daily chores like dressing, putting away clean dishes, and doing laundry, they both needed a distraction. In all of their exploration of the pyramid, Daniel and Fate encountered only one unusual thing, a square stone column 15 feet wide. It was on the first floor opposite the front door, and it was the only column in the entire building. On the side of the column farthest from the pyramid's front entrance was a mysterious door. They had dismissed it earlier, having found no obvious way to open it, but now decided it deserved another try. Horizontal iron straps joined the thick, vertical wooden planks. It looked ancient, but inside, sheltered from the worst of the weather, it showed no sign of the rot that had reduced the front door to ruin. It had no visible handle or opening mechanism of any kind. The stonework on either side was decorated with images similar to those on the pyramid's facade. 9 of the stones in a 3x3 grid on each side were smaller. Each had a black iron ring, resembling a door knocker. Fate stepped closer and pulled one of the rings. The small stone slid a few inches toward him and stopped. He pushed it until it was even with the others. Another push, and it depressed several inches inside the wall. "What do you make of it?" "It's a puzzle," said Daniel, almost giddy at the idea of having a new one to solve. "It probably opens the door." "Well, we should try and solve it. I don't see any other way out of here," said Fate. They were interrupted by another loud roar. They peered around the side of the column and saw that the bear had returned. It roared again in frustration. "We should definitely try and solve it," said Fate with more enthusiasm. He ran his fingertips over the stones. "Is there any hope of deciphering these markings?" "No," said Daniel quickly. "There's no common point of reference. The answer might be in one of these books, but without a translation table." Fate's eyebrows shot up. "Oh, maybe we don't have to." He dropped to the floor and rolled. Once again on his feet, he found his coins and began tossing them. The same message came up 3 times in a row. "There, that's better. Let's reset all these that are standing out or recessed." The bear scraped at the floor as far into the room as he could reach and roared again. Daniel pushed and pulled the various stones until they were all flush, and the wall on either side of the door looked like an odd collection of black iron rings hanging on a flat stone wall. "Heads means pull," said Fate in a formal voice. "Is that part of it?" asked Daniel excitedly. He retrieved his notebook. "Do you have to audibly declare your intentions?" Fate shrugged. "Don't know. I've never opened a mystery door before, but it seems appropriate." "Wait, what does tails mean then?" asked Daniel, frustrated at the lack of hard and fast rules. "Push it, or leave it flush with the rest of the wall." Fate looked confused. The bear roared again, but retreated to circle the pyramid again. "I don't know. How about this? The first toss means leave it where it is or change it. Then toss again, and that means push or pull. Sound good?" Daniel nodded but looked doubtful. "With 3 different options for each of 18 stones, it's very unlikely that you'll get a solution using this method." "Let's just try, shall we, Daniel? This sort of thing has worked for me in the past." He tossed the coins. "Turn left. Let's say that means push." "Why?" insisted Daniel. "Why not?" "There has to be a reason for everything," said Daniel, exasperated. "No, there doesn't, Daniel. You should give up that notion as soon as possible, definitely before you start dating. Anyway, from where I'm standing against this wall," he leaned to his left, resting his cheek on the wall while still looking in the direction of the door. "Left goes into the wall." Is that reason enough for you? But it would be the opposite if you were on the other side, argued Daniel. Let's just try this, Daniel. If it doesn't work, we'll change tack. Push the first one in, please. Daniel grumbled. He really didn't like uncertainty, but he complied, and the stone moved a few inches into the wall before stopping. Fate was already tossing the coins again. Turn right. Pull, please. Daniel pulled the second stone and stood ready at the third. Before they could continue, a commotion at the front door behind them drew their attention, but it wasn't the bear. A dozen squirrels rushed in through the open doorway. They charged Daniel and Fate, climbing up their clothing and scratching any bare skin. They emptied Daniel's pockets and took the coins from Fate's hand. In an instant, they had everything within grasp and scampered off to the stairway, anxious to inventory their spoils. "Oh no," said Daniel, his voice filled with dread. He reached for his earring. It was gone. "They have my earring." "Well, don't panic," said Fate reassuringly. He slowly crept toward the squirrels. "I've had some experience with these vermin. You just need something to trade." He unzipped his shirt pocket and found a shiny new silver quarter. He waved it in the air for the squirrels to see and tossed it on the floor at his feet. One of the less fortunate squirrels who had come up empty-handed after their raid ran to the coin, popped it into his cheek, and ran back to his friends. "How does this work exactly?" asked Daniel with a smirk. Fate replied through gritted teeth. They were supposed to drop one of the other things to take the coin. He groaned in frustration and unzipped another pocket. The squirrels seemed to know what he was doing. They all turned their attention to Fate, anxious to see what treasure he would offer. "Wait, I have a better idea," said Daniel. He shrugged off his backpack. Inside it was the small plastic bag of candy, raisins, and peanuts Frankie had given him. "I almost forgot I had this. Try the peanuts." He tossed the bag to Fate. Fate placed a single peanut on the floor and took one step back. The squirrels didn't move. "Go on then," he shouted. "It's got to taste better than coins and earrings." "Dump the whole bag," Daniel suggested. "I was hoping to save some for myself," whined Fate. "I don't care for peanuts, but I quite like these candies. And raisins. Well, raisins still taste like victory to me." He sighed and emptied the bag onto the floor in front of his feet. Every squirrel in the room ran toward the pile. Some were in such a rush that they climbed over their companions to get to the brightly colored candies. They swarmed over the treats, and when the mass of fur receded, all that was left was the earring, the coins, and every one of the peanuts. Fate gathered the coins and handed the earring to Daniel, who returned it to his ear. Daniel spotted the glint of silver under the peanuts. He kicked them aside with his foot and revealed a silver metal rectangle. "Is that Shadrach's lighter?" chuckled Fate in surprise. "Looks like it," said Daniel. "So either he survived and they robbed him, or the squirrels found his dead body." Said Fate with a look of concern. He shook it off and glanced over at the squirrels. "At least we'll have no more problems with this lot. It's like a game with them. There are rules. They make no sense, but there are rules. And one of the rules is that they only steal from you once a day. I asked a biologist about it once, many years ago. He didn't seem to know anything about squirrels at all, kept wanting to talk about finches." They turned their attention back to the odd door and continued with the remainder of the 9 stones on the left before moving to the right side of the door for the rest. Turn left came up quite often, as did turn right. Daniel's confidence grew with every coin toss when he noticed that continue and stop had not come up a single time. "It would seem," said Fate between calls, "turn left, that the stones are meant turn right, to be pushed or pulled, turn right, but never flush with the wall." He had been snatching the coins in mid-air with the practiced confidence of someone having performed a task thousands of times, but this time he fumbled, and the coins fell to the floor. They stared in amazement. Both coins had landed upright, on their edges. In order to attach one to the other, the jeweler had mounted them in silver rings called bezels, which each had a smooth edge. Even so, the uneven surface of the stone floor made the odds of one landing in such a way incalculably remote. For two to do so was breathtakingly close to impossible, yet the coin stood defiant, impossibly balanced on edge. Fate looked at Daniel, who was wide-eyed. "That was the last one," whispered Daniel. "Is it a push or a pull?" Fate slowly shook his head. "In all my years." The bear had finished his long circuit around the pyramid, but returned with another roar that made them both jump. "Try either one! Push or pull!" shouted Fate impatiently. Daniel pulled. The stone refused. He pushed with no better luck, but the iron ring did something the others hadn't. It rotated. He turned it a bit more, and the wall made a loud clunk, followed by the clinking of chains sliding over pulleys. The right edge of the mystery door rotated into the room, enough for Fate to grasp the edge. He pulled it open, revealing a dark stairway, leading down to an even darker tunnel. "We'll need some light," said Fate, just before Daniel flicked the lighter to life. He held the small flame as deep into the darkness as he could. "How long do you think this tunnel is? The lighter feels almost empty." Fate chewed his lower lip. "I'd rather not get stuck in a dark catacomb with no light. We have your spear. Maybe we can make it into a torch. Do you know how to do that?" Daniel stared blankly at Fate. "What?" "It's just that—" Daniel began. "Go on, spit it out. I won't bite," said Fate. "You said you were 500 years old," said Daniel. "Ah, I get it," said Fate, "and therefore I should know everything about everything, including the art of torch-making." "Exactly," said Daniel. "Well, Daniel, the truth is I haven't had a lot of need for skulking around in the dark. I've actually led a very sheltered life. I like to be indoors with a glass of wine before the sun goes down. Do you know how to make a torch?" Daniel thought about it for a moment. The Romans used sulfur and lime. Later, people mostly used wax, but anything that will burn works. Kerosene or even tar. "Danielpedia," said Fate mockingly. "Wait, you said wax. Don't you have some crayons in your school pack?" "I'm not 5, said Daniel. "Well, don't get so defensive. I don't know what children play with these days." He snapped his fingers and ran to the stairs. The squirrels watched him curiously, but made no move against him. Rather than climbing the stairs as Daniel expected, Fate disappeared behind them and returned with a straw broom. "Good to see the understairs are just as useless here as they are in our world. Good place for a broom closet." He held the broom upside down. Daniel touched the flame to it. The straw was dry, and it caught quickly. "Ha ha!" exclaimed Fate, clearly pleased with himself. "Instant torch!" The fire flared brilliantly but quickly went out, leaving only smoke and glowing stumps of straw around a bare broomstick. Fate looked crestfallen. "That always works in the movies." He snapped his fingers and shouted down the dark stairs. "It would certainly be lucky if we found a lamp down here somewhere." He winked at Daniel and turned back to quickly add, "A lamp full of oil, or whatever they used here." They peered into the darkness. Daniel lit the lighter again. No lamp was visible as far as the dim light could penetrate. "I do have one more idea," said Fate cautiously. "But you're not going to like it." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "There is one thing that we have in abundance." Daniel stared until he realized what Fate meant, and shock replaced confusion. "Burn the books?" "We wouldn't have to burn them all. Just one or two, and you said yourself we can't read them anyway," Fate pleaded. The bear at the front door switched tactics and stopped trying to dig through the stone floor, instead swiping his claws across the side of the doorway. One of the claws landed in a mortar joint between stones and dug a deep gouge. Another attempt removed more of the soft mortar, and the upper stone dropped a fraction of an inch. The wall shook. "No choice as I see it," said Fate firmly. He grabbed 2 books from the closest stack and ushered Daniel down the stairs, pulling the door closed behind them.